Okay, so let's start today's. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to read you a footnote from this book, from the Mystery of Marriage.
It's not only about marriage. Do you tell us what page?
Yeah. Well, you'll see in a moment that it's one of those notes that is sort of like, I don't know what to say, but I'm not going to say it here.
He looks regular, I'm sure. No, I did him already. No, but now, what's the news?
Yes.
Is it the book, Living in Divine Space, that's on sale?
Yeah.
And it's the book in English?
Yeah, it's in English.
I know, now. Could I ask to bring my, what's the best way to get one?
I don't know. We don't have any in the office, so you have to
Come to the class?
call somebody up. I'll give you a number at the end of class. Okay, let's start. So the note is on page 97, and I'll read you the text and then the note, and then you'll see where we're going. He's talking here about stress in a relationship. So he says, if the stress refuses to resolve itself in spite of such accommodations, the couple must face the possibility that perhaps theirs is a relationship that can be rectified only by being ended. So first of all, this is a different type of language than you would normally use, that you rectify, meaning you fix the relationship by ending it. Divorce, when required by the Torah, is compared in Chassidut to the exodus from Egypt. A husband who is not his wife's devoted partner is like a pharaoh to her. Divorce thus becomes a form of liberation, redeeming her from an enslaving environment and an unhealthy attachment. Though it is not easy, the woman must have faith that she will find her true match elsewhere. Just as the Jews loyally followed Moses into the desert and there discovered their true beloved waiting for them at Mount Sinai. Okay, so this is very picturesque language, which maybe doesn't give a lot of hope. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the language that he chose, the footnote that I'll read in a moment. This was the text. You have to keep it with its eye towards otherwise it doesn't know what the temperature is here. And he put it on feel. Yeah. You should put it on feel, I feel, and then
What does it mean, feel? What do you
well,
do?
later. Okay. So the language here is it sounds very symbolic. It doesn't really help somebody who's counseling, right? You'll go out into the Egypt and get away from Pharaoh, and you'll find your beloved at Mount Sinai. So what we're going to try to do is explain why he chose this symbolic language and what he's trying to say. And he gives a hint here. He says, see the Hasidic commentary. This is the footnote. See the Hasidic commentary, Ramatayim Tzufim, on the beginning of Tana Devei Eliyahu. Clearly, the reverse situation is also possible. We'll get into that later. But here he gives the hint. He says, open up. There's a Hasidic parish on Tana Devei Eliyahu, on the Medrash of Eliyahu Navi, which is called Tana Devei Eliyahu. And that Hasidic parish was written by a student of the Choyze of Lublin. And he brought a lot of Hasidus into it.
What was his name?
I don't remember. Ephraim something, I think.
But not about the Sfirot.
There's a lot of Kabbalah in it, but it's Hasidus. Okay. So what we'll do today is really we're going to open up that text. And unfortunately by heart, because I don't have it in front of me.
The
And
Siddur. You can...
no, you can't find Ramatayim Tzufim in the Siddur. Not the parish itself. No. Okay. So let's start with a very basic question that's asked. And that question is, in the order of the Mishnah, the first tractate that deals with wedding matters, with marital matters, is Yevamot. Yevamot is what's called levirate marriage. And levirate marriage basically I think comes from the word leverage. And the idea is that a woman whose husband passed away and they didn't have children, then according to the Torah, the first people that already have a connection to her by virtue of her husband passing away, the first people that have this connection and that should wed her, the widow, are the brothers, the unmarried brothers of.
have to be unmarried.
Okay, first of all, the unmarried, though, you try to. Today it's only the unmarried, because the married can't take another wife. And it can be any of them. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, even though the Gemara says mitzvah bagadol, that it's a mitzvah by the eldest to do this. So the Mishnah starts with levirate marriage, which is a very strange way to start. What would you expect it to start the marital issues with? With kiddushin, which is actually the last one of the tractates in Seder Nashim, okay, in the marital matters tractates. So the second one after that is Ktuvot, and after that Gitin, and only after that Kiddushin. So there's this whole thing that there's either the whole issue of marriage starts with a second marriage, really, because levirate marriage is always a second marriage. She was already married, and her husband passed away. And more importantly, even before we come to Kiddushin, we already have Gitin. You already have how to divorce, how to perform a divorce. So there's a lot of, everybody asks this question, why is it? Why is it this way? So the Rambam has a very interesting answer. The Rambam says that from the fact that levirate marriage is first, we learn the same principle that we learned at Mount Sinai, which is that naaseh comes before nishma, that necessity comes before will. Meaning there's first, you deal with questions of necessity, then you think about what you want, which is a principle in life, right? Because that's how people live also. I first have to take care of my needs, those that are necessary, and then I can take time and do what I like to do, what I want for my will, what I want for myself. Okay? So that's a big principle in Torah. First naaseh, first you do, and then you get into the stuff that you want, into how you want to understand it, how it sits with you, and so on. So that's the Rambam's answer. That the reason that the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda put together starts with levirate marriage is because there the wedding is a necessity. You're forced to. Nobody asks you. You can refuse, but in point of fact, you never chose this woman. It's actually your brother who chose her. And now you're obligated to marry her. Of course, you can say no, and then you do chalitza, and it's over that way. But this is the type of marriage that comes from necessity. And only much later can you begin to discuss, after you've built with a person the bare necessities, can you begin to discuss the process of figuring out what you want. Okay? And like we said, with respect to a wife, meaning that you chose. Kiddushin is that you chose.
No, it doesn't talk about that second wife.
Sorry?
You don't go on to the next. It's not about that marriage that the brother marries her. And then first he marries her, and then
Yevamot is about that.
Is she right for me?
No, Yevamot is about a marriage of necessity, meaning that I'm obligated to marry this woman. Now, I didn't choose her. Like I said, you can always refuse, but you didn't choose here. There was no choice involved. It was necessity, because she married my brother, and my brother passed away before he had children. So that.
Refuse, I think it's necessary.
Well, it's a necessity because I can't choose her as my wife, meaning I didn't go looking through all the women that were available and chose her. It came to me, sort of dropped down from the heaven, that here's the shidduch. This is, do you want or not? But I didn't choose. I didn't even meet her once, maybe. I don't know even who she is. It could be in a different country.
And otherwise, it's not allowed at all for a man to marry
is, in any other situation besides his dying, a man is not allowed to have relations with his brother's wife or marry
Of course,
her.
right.
Otherwise, so I don't know if that fits into.
That's interesting. So if her husband died and they had children.
So then you don't have to.
You're not allowed to marry.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So
You're
But
not
it's
allowed.
forbidden to
Right,
do it.
right, right. Okay. The next tractate is I think we talked about this even once, is even more depressing in that respect, Ktubot, because all you talk about is money. Really, Ktubot is mostly about money, and who deserves a Ktubah of 100 and who deserves a Ktubah of 200. Because the Ktubah is a monetary contract. It has nothing to do with the marriage itself. The marriage itself, it's not a religious, put it this way, it's not a religious artifact.
And what's Gittin?
Gittin is divorce. And it's only the last tractate that we come to Kiddushin, that we come to the actual process of getting married.
But why is it today they say all the Ktubot are the same?
No, they're not the same. No. Depending on the Rav. Meaning, in other words, that I don't know what they do with people who aren't frum, but I've asked a number of times when I was in Sarah Kiddushin about women who are, first of all, if somebody's a second marriage, there's no question in the world, it's called a Ktubat Armilta. Like, that's what it's called. And it's different. She only gets 100, and it's written differently. I don't know what they do with women who, for certain, have been living together with the husband for whatever amount of time. I would imagine that they write only 100, and somehow conceal it from the family what it means that it's only 100. Maybe the family doesn't even care today. It's like not even an issue. In any case, why is it all about money? Why is the next tractate all about contracts? Because it's really talking again about a second marriage. A second marriage revolves around monetary issues. It can't be otherwise. Why? Because second marriages usually involve the woman already having children, and she wants to protect her children's inheritance. So all the very complex issues of how do you retain control over possessions even though you've been married, and theoretically when a woman is married then all the money goes, all her possessions go into a common bin, right? They belong to both of them together. So there's a lot of discussion about how you keep it somehow separate. How do you do this? So this is also talking about a second marriage. So there's this amazing, certainly Gittin, divorce, is about the end of the first marriage. It's not even talking about marriage at all. So again, there's this question of why does the Mishnah talk so much about these b'di'evid, right? These things that have already happened, and finish the first marriage and not start from a very positive, optimistic place that you should start with Kiddushin. That's how it should be.
Nice. Or
What?
nobody ever said Gemara was...
Set up, but it's, again, how do you want to teach somebody? Here's a young child who's learning right away, right? They're 10, 11 years old. And right away you deal with the problems. You don't deal with the with the good
Well,
part.
these days, by the time they're 11, they've already experienced it.
Maybe some of them have,
But
some of them haven't.
Back then, it certainly wasn't.
Mhm.
Because they're supposed to think. The Gemara is supposed to teach you how to think and give you these complex,
Still,
crazy scenarios.
No, okay. No, but you don't have to be depressing. It's nothing, right? You don't, even though certainly people think better when they're depressed, but that's a different issue.
Oh, interesting.
What makes you say
What?
that?
I can't think at all. Maybe men are different.
No, it's called, well, not exactly depressed, but ascetic. When you're ascetic, you think much better than if you're. If I look at the popcorn and I think about the popcorn, I'm not going to think very clearly. Right? If I look at the ginger and do the same, I'm not going to think very clearly.
This
I
is
have
not
to.
flat.
If I think about the air conditioning,
That's great.
then I won't be able to concentrate on what I'm trying to say. So asceticism is always been the key to deep thought. I mean, the less I have to think about my physical surroundings and my physical needs, the more I can. Okay. In any case, In any case,
Dabadin.
it's so funny that you mentioned that today. Why did you mention that?
Because I saw your comment.
Okay. Okay, I was going to say, because the Yortzeit is next week. I didn't know why you brought it up. Yeah, I'm still looking to hear a shir from her or something. In any case, no, different time. Okay, so what's the topic here? The topic here is that Zivug Sheni comes before Zivug Rishon.
This with Adam and Hava.
Right, also. That the second Zivug, meaning the second marital union, actually precedes the first.
What does that mean?
How can the second come before the first? Because the question is, what is the second? The second can be understood as that there was failure. That's one possibility. The first failed, and therefore you had to come to the second. Or it could be that if you have the second in mind before you start, you don't have to come to it. Meaning, if you know about what can go wrong beforehand, and you build yourself based on that, then the first zivug can be eternal, can work. Especially in our generations, that's the case.
If you're properly prepared.
And the Arizal even says this. He says that when the Gemara talks about zivug rishon and zivug sheni, first marriage and second marriage, it's not talking about actual marriages. He says it's talking about states of mind. He says it very clearly. That you can be in a first marriage and it'll be like a second. That's almost like the ideal. And you can be in a second marriage and it'll be like the first. So he right away takes it out of the context of history, call it, like chronology, what happened here. And he introduces that it's related to states of mind. Okay? So now, this is a big topic that I want to finish by Tu B'Av, because really that's the date. That's the date that... sorry?
So what is
There's a lot that we need to discuss. So this week I only want to do something, one part of this. Before we get into what we'll do this week, so I'll just mention that that's how it's described in wedding invitations, states of mind, where it says the connection between the chassan and the kala is either im bat gilo or im bchirat libo, either with the woman who is of the same age, which means that they're from the same mazel, meaning they fit in shamayim somehow, or people write im bchirat libo, which means with the choice of his heart, which means that he chooses. Okay? So to get into this whole topic, I want to start with that footnote that we just read about divorce specifically. Okay, to begin to understand how this all works. And this will give us not just, I think, insight into marriage, but also into our whole situation as human beings in this world and what exactly we can do here.
So you're saying in wedding invitations, people choose between
Right.
Musaf of saying one or the other?
Right, they write either Ein Bet Gimel or Ein Bet Lamed. Ein Bet Gimel is the Imbat Gilo, with the woman of his age, and Ein Bet Lamed is Im Bchirat Libo, with the woman of his choosing of his heart. Right, that his heart chose this woman.
Is there
And the
something?
Chabad custom is Imbat Gilo.
Right, of course.
Is it
The
actually
whole
printed?
Haredi
Something's
custom is Ein
actually
Bet Gimel.
printed on the
Yeah, they write it between the names of the Chassan and the Kala. Okay, so yeah, usually, I mean, maybe in English they don't write it, but in Hebrew certainly, any classic wedding invitation will have both sides. Okay. So let's begin to look at divorce. Where's the first mention of divorce in the Torah? So the word divorce is today lidgaresh, like girushin.
Oh, Hagar.
Even before that, long before that.
Before Hagar?
They were
Adam and
forced
Eve?
out of Gan Eden.
Right. It says vayigaresh et ha'adam asher asa Right? He exiled him.
Who exiled who?
Hashem.
God exiled Adam.
Right. That's divorce.
That's divorce. That was divorce. He was.
Divorce.
Oh, it was even divorce in practice, because when he was thrown out of Gan Eden, he also divorced his wife,
Yes.
and that's why Shet was born only 130 years later. Okay.
What do you mean his wife? Both people?
Adam and Eve divorced after they were divorced from the Garden of Eden. They divorced. And they had to remarry. And that's what it says, V'adam yada et Chava ishto.
Second half.
Right, that was the second time that they got married. And then they had Shet.
Hashem isn't it? Hashem is still good.
Said it? Hold on, we'll see what it
And
means.
Hashem threw out more than that. He threw them both out, but it's only divorced
Right.
Adam.
But that also, it's sort of like what happens today when there's the biggest the biggest effect on their lives was that they no longer had sustenance. They had to provide for themselves.
Right, yeah.
So that's a lot of that is what happens today. People get divorced when there's a very difficult economic situation at home. Right? It leads to a lot of divorce. So it also led them to divorce. And of course, each one blamed the other, right? You caused it, and she said he caused it, and they kept going back and forth. It didn't work too well.
And then Lemach comes 130 years later and his wives and says,
And Lemech also says, if you don't act nicely, I'm going to divorce you. But that's much later.
but then he comes to Adam and somehow they come
Right.
back together. There's something and they're coming back together 130 years later.
It's more than 130. It's over 1,000 years later.
No, but Adam and Chava coming back together because somebody came to them and
Oh,
Why did you
that it was
separate
him.
from your
That it was
wife?
him that said,
This is why
right, could be.
separated
Could
from
be.
him and-
Right. Okay, I didn't prepare that, so. But that's a whole topic in and of itself. Okay. What is the Garden of Eden really? So, if I ask somebody today, what does it mean that after you die you go to the Garden of Eden? So what do people understand? Okay, Olam Neshama, the world of souls. So what do you do there? What do souls do?
It's higher now.
Okay, well, what does that
Praise
mean?
Hashem.
They what?
Praise Hashem.
Okay. If you don't have a body, what do you do?
have a spiritual experience.
You have a spiritual experience. What does that look like? What's a spiritual experience?
You learn the Torah.
So if you have a body, a spiritual experience could be not having a body. Okay, but now you don't have a body at all. There's nothing, you can't leave the body, so there's none of that going on. So what does happen? What could be a spiritual experience? So says the Rambam, and this is accepted across the board, the Rebbe has a mimer on this, that the world of souls is a world of Torah. It's a world of thought. Okay? What does this mean? It means that you get to develop, continue to develop whatever areas of Torah you acquire during your lifetime. Okay? Each person based on his levels. A woman who's not obligated to learn, so it could be the areas that she did learn, or she gets to be with her husband in whatever areas he is learning.
This was a balcony. Where is it happening?
Right here in front of you. You just can't see it.
I just.
Gan Eden is right here.
Okay, so that's the part that the Torah is in.
What?
We're going to get together and then.
Oh yeah. No, wherever, so that we'll see. But wherever a person learned, that's the chamber he goes into. He continues to develop that approach, that topic in Torah that he learned. Okay. The world of rejuvenation, meaning Olam HaTchiyah, that's a physical world already, and that is based on the mitzvot that you did, not the Torah learning, but rather the mitzvot that you did during your life. Okay? There's and every Jew has a part to the world to come. That's talking about the world, the world after the Tchiyat HaMetim. And what does it mean? That because every Jew does mitzvot, there's no such thing as a Jew who doesn't do mitzvot. So everybody has a part there.
What else is that called? You said rejuvenation.
Olam HaTchiyah, the world of rejuvenation, where you come back to life.
The resurrection of the dead. And the Neshama comes back into
The same was true of Adam and Chava in the Garden of Eden. Meaning, why do we call this world of neshamot, we call it Gan Eden? Where do we get this idea? So the simple reasoning is that that's exactly what they experienced when they were in Gan Eden. Meaning that when they were in Gan Eden, they didn't have to take care of themselves because they were not yet fully physical. Rather, they lived in a more theoretical experience.
The body was transparent.
The body was transparent. It wasn't people usually think that they ate and drank simply
They say that
everything that was there. But that's not really the description. The body was not yet dependent on physical sustenance. So what they were involved in, that's how the sages explain. Lovda'u l'shomra. What is lovda'u l'shomra? The Torah itself. To serve the Torah, avodah Torah, l'shomra, and to keep it. So they were in a purely spiritual reality. Not purely, I don't want to say purely, because there was some physical aspect to it, but it was relatively spiritual. And when man was divorced, when Adam and Chava were taken out, they were taken out el ha'adama shel misham lukachta, to the land, to the earth from which you were taken. Meaning that's when they received their full embodiment. They didn't have full embodiment until then. And now they needed clothes and so on. Okay?
So the closest situation was in the midbar.
Right. It's very close to it. It's very similar. So now we have to get into, this was one of the topics that the Alter Rebbe talked about in last week's Parsha, which is, what is the difference between being in Gan Eden, or being only a soul without a body, and having a body? What's the main difference? So thought there exists, and even feelings exist. There's even a form of action. What do I mean by a form of action? How can you have a form of action without a body? Well, today, a lot of people have a form of action without a body. Anybody who deals with computers in any way has action without a body. But let's make it more particular, that even if you don't have a body, you can learn in the Torah all the laws pertaining to actions. And to have an action without a body means that the mind already understands what action means. Okay? It's a little bit theoretical right now, but you'll see where this is going in a second. So, says the Alter Rebbe, what changed? What changed the moment that the neshama comes into the body? What changes the moment that happens? What changed for Adam and Eve the moment they were divorced from Gan Eden? So he says the main thing that changed, now they have will. Until now they had no ratzon and no bchira. They had no choice or will. And he doesn't even mention the word bchira. Bchira I'm adding from the Ramatayim Tzofim. He mentions that. But the simple explanation is they had no will yet.
But what about eating from the fruit? Wasn't that choice and will?
So it could be that this was the beginning of will, and therefore that's what leads to the expulsion. Okay, and it could be that it's not. That it's not even a will. Hashem set it up. That's all.
Which is a total setup.
It's a setup, like we say in Tehillim, Norali lal bnei Adam, that he sets us up. Why? Because he wanted us to leave Gan Eden. He didn't want us to remain there.
And they get punished for setup?
No, hold on. Remember what we just read. You have to have faith that leaving the marriage with God is not anything but a rectification for the marriage. It's a completely different take on what divorce means. It means that to rectify the relationship, we have to be apart.
That's why all us women are still alone.
Hold on.
A lot of us. We're being rectified.
The usual way that people look at divorce is that it's a failure. But what he wrote here is that even when divorce is imminent, it's going to happen, you still have a role as a marriage counselor to explain to them why the divorce is now the last piece of the rectification of the marriage. And we'll understand in a moment why. Because, and in one sentence we just said this, it gives the woman will. Okay?
And it doesn't work the same if there's a death.
Same thing. Any termination of the marriage is giving the woman will.
Even if it's to break up the marriage.
Even if
That's where she finds her will.
right. Through the divorce,
True.
that's where she finds her will. Meaning that until now, she hasn't had will. Or even if she's had will, it's been vicarious in the sense of awakening her husband's will.
Right.
But not self-will. It's not something... Now, let's go from this to a different area. Going back to each one of us, before we came down into the world, so our neshama was before Hashem, and we learned Torah, and we knew the whole Torah, and so on. So we came down, and suddenly we're divorced from Hashem. You don't feel Hashem. You don't know where Hashem is here. How do you reconnect?
Wow.
For doing mitzvot.
Through will.
No.
The will is to reconnect. It's the call it the conduit through which you reconnect to where you were. That's why we say that it's not just that having the will is just something new. It's the rectification of what was in the past.
What about all these people who are still married?
Hold on. So that's what we began to say, that this we'll talk about as we go on, that the ideal marriage now is to have the second marriage even before the first marriage. It's to be divorced before you're even... You have to understand this even before you get married.
And what arouses the will to reconnect with Hashem?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful question. So now, that's why this is linked to last week's Parsha. The Alter Rebbe explains that Bilam, what does his name mean? Everybody knows this. His name means without a nation. Bli Am. He has no nation. Because it says, Eretz Bnei Amo. Where did he come from? The land of his nation. Who's his nation? Nobody knows. He's a cosmopolitan individual. He has no nationality. Okay? He doesn't belong to anything. Said it. He's a very modern person.
No, because many people say I'm universal.
Okay, good. Right? He was the original universal individual. Right? His mamish, John Lennon's no borders, no nationalities, no nothing, and everything's peaceful, right? And because of that, the one thing that he can't stand is somebody who is well defined in terms of their belonging, in terms of their commitment. What is he saying? He's saying here, and I don't want to get into political undertones, so I'll try to keep it psychological as much as I can, that the nature of the world is such that if God decided to create a world in which He is not experienced directly, that's how He created the world.
It's hidden.
He's completely concealed. There should not be commitment back to Him.
Oh, yes.
And that makes sense to a lot of people. A lot of people say, look,
Since I can't see it.
I know that there was a creator. The Greeks also understood this. Somebody had to create this. It didn't come out of nothing. But I have no commitment towards Him. Why? Because if in any way the creator is still relevant, you shouldn't have to tell me what He wants, because I would know by myself. For instance, if I say that my breathing is being godly, so that's pshat. Why is that pshat? Because I need to breathe. Here it is. If I tell you my necessities are godly, so that's how the Creator impacts my life right now, right? That I breathe, that I eat, all these things are divine actions. Why? Because when Hashem created the world, He built it in such a way that in the end it would be a human being who needed to breathe, who needed to eat. So that expresses His will. His will is nature. That's what it is. But that type of will is not written on a, you don't have to write it out. You don't have to tell anybody about it. Right? Do you have to tell anybody to breathe? You have to tell anybody to eat? You have to tell anybody to sleep? You don't have to tell people these things. Why? Because they're natural. So that's the impact of the Creator on the world if he decided to conceal himself. Only in the way that he's revealed naturally, through nature. And here come these people called the Jewish people, and they decide that they received a Torah. And the Torah suddenly says, the Creator wants A, B, C, and D, and you ask them, where is this in nature? I don't see it in nature. He told me. So, Gesundheit, leave me alone. But the moment you say something like that, don't you see how contrary to reality this is?
Not all Torah is not in nature.
You could say that the Torah wants to bring you to a higher nature, but you can't say that the Torah is natural. Because if it was natural, I wouldn't need it. Again, we perform the mitzvot not because they're natural, but because we were commanded to. Commanding is an expression of will, meaning that Hashem reveals His will to me. What do you mean He reveals His will to you? He already revealed what He wanted by creating the world the way it is. So if you come and tell me there's something else, except for what nature says, either you're lying to everybody, or you're destroying the world, one or the other.
Oh, come on. It's an afterthought.
That's why you couldn't stand also the concept of a chosen people. Because again, that's an expression of will that's after the fact. After the fact of creation. Now you choose somebody. Mela, if you would have made Jews with 2 heads, everybody would know they're special. If you would have made a Jew with a brain that's 7 times the size of a regular human being. So I understand that he's different. But the moment that they look the same, a Jew and a non-Jew, so what do you want from me? How can you tell me that these are chosen?
There was a Jew with 2 heads.
Yes?
There's a lot of people with 2 heads. The Siamese twins have 2 heads.
No, I wouldn't say all.
And there's a story in the Gemara that we learned with Plimo. In any case,
I had a Jewish roommate in college, and she had never known a Jewish person. She traveled around the world, and she was sort of disappointed that I was so normal. Like, she actually really kind of thought maybe there was some kind of horns.
yeah, you must have something.
Something.
But it's not.
It's in the Neshama.
Masada, but again, the whole idea here is that it is an expression of will, not an expression of thought, of even feeling, of even action. The thing that Bilam couldn't stand, and the thing that he found to be an affront to his understanding what God is that somehow somebody should be outside the system. That doesn't make sense. So now if you take marriage as a system, and in that system, everything flows naturally. That's like the first zivug, the first marriage. Everything should be natural. You shouldn't have to figure out problems, right? Because it's the most natural thing in the world for 2 people to get married. Why would you come to a break? Why would it end up in divorce? There's something. So what do people say? It wasn't meant to be. People have a problem with this. What do you mean? Why didn't it work out? Because it wasn't meant to be. Because it can't be that things that are good break down. They shouldn't. They should just normally flow. After so many years, of course, after 50 years, 60 years, one of the couple, breaks down physically, they die, so that's it. That's the end of the marriage. But that they would cause it themselves, that they be, right, in their arguing or whatever, not coming to terms, whatever it is, that they would cause it, that, why would that happen? And the truth is that if a woman decides, or if a man decides, it could be either side, decides that they won't have an independent will in the marriage, it really can't break apart. It really can't. You can't divorce if there's nobody to fight with. Unless you're just a very not nice person, and you just go crazy or whatever. But normally, if one half of the couple decides that I forsake my will, I give it up completely for my spouse, at most what I'll do is I'll awaken their will, but I'm not going to have a separate will of my own, separate wants, separate needs, then divorce is impossible.
They leak out, though.
Can't happen.
Those needs, you can make that conscious choice, but the needs
Right, you can
leak
make,
out.
or you make the conscious choice again and again that I will step on my needs. Not to, let's leave needs aside because needs is a little bit too strong, but will. That I don't have any wants of my own. I have needs, and needs have to be met. But I'm talking about what I want. And if you put that aside, divorce is impossible. It wouldn't happen. Again, unless the person is mamish or Russia, the other side, and says, I just don't want to be with you. But most people, if you give them somebody who's like their, in this case, servant, who would say no? Okay, most people would like to have somebody who has no will of their own and just does their bidding. Whatever.
Some people want a real relationship.
Hold on. Now we understand what a real relationship means. A real relationship assumes that both sides have will. That's the big difference.
And that's what Hashem wants.
Right? And Hashem wanted it also.
Wait, they do have will? You said you're not supposed to have will.
No. I said that if one or the other, the husband or the wife, doesn't have a will of their own, it won't lead to divorce. And that's called Gan Eden, strangely enough.
Right, so it's not that they both have will, they both don't have will.
Right, but now she says some people want a real relationship. What does a real relationship entail? What does it require? It requires two wills. It requires us to have two wills here. If there's not two wills, so it's not what we call a real relationship. Or, at least it's not this world. It's something else. But in this world, every human being that you meet has a will. And you have to get along with them. And that's what we call a real relationship. Right? The assumption in this, like for instance, when children are in their teen years. So what's their failing? Their failing is to acknowledge that other people have will also. That's their biggest failing. Meaning they see their parents and they don't see them as a person with will. They see them just as some kind of... Ken, somebody who's trying to force me not to have a will. That's what they see. They don't see that I have to develop a relationship like with anybody else. And unfortunately that carries over for most people into adult life also, that they also can't understand how, and unfortunately also carries over for the parents who saw it the other way around, that the child doesn't have a will. By the way, one of the biggest problems with teen years is that the parents don't realize that the child is no longer 6 years old and doesn't have a will, but now they do have a will. And the moment that they have a will, you can't just tell them, do so-and-so. It's not going to work. So you have to find a way, like with any person that you would meet, how to negotiate, how to respect the other person's will. That's the biggest issue for parents. But for children, it's exactly the same issue, just reversed. That they can't see that their parents maybe have a will. Okay? They also have a will.
But in Gan Eden, they only did the will of Hashem.
Right, but it's not called doing will.
Only.
There is no will except for Hashem. It's not even doing. Like we said, it's only a world of thought and intellect. That's what Gan Eden is like. You don't actually do anything. Even when you think about a mitzvah, you only think about it. You don't actually do it. It's the easiest thing in the world to learn Shulchan Aruch. It's the hardest thing in the world to actually do it. Okay? Relatively speaking. It's very easy to learn it in theory, but to actually do it, maybe to jump in the morning. A million things there that are very difficult. What do you have to do? You have to adopt Hashem's will. That's basically what we're doing. Okay? We're getting somewhere here, but not yet. Okay, so that's exactly the next point.
What is it? Does it have to adopt Hashem's will?
What it's saying is that the only connection that I can have in this world, in the divorced world, outside of Gan Eden with Hashem, really not the only, strike that, not the only, but the chidush, the point of life, is what I'll do with my will, with my newly found will. Meaning the moment that I was divorced from Gan Eden, from my own personal Gan Eden, my neshama came down into the world, what I received was will. Okay? Over time, took a few years, age 13, 14, you receive will already. And now the question is, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to claim that my will is just as independent as my existence, and therefore I should only follow my will, what I want, what I feel that I want? Or can I submit my will to something higher? Can I reclaim the connection that I had in Gan Eden? Can I reclaim the connection that I had before I came down into the world? And the only way to do it, the word only is correct, to really create the connection again, here in the state of being in a body, being embodied, is through my will. By submitting my will to Hashem's will. Make your will like His. And for that I need Torah. Okay? In that sense I need Torah.
Can someone have dveikus like they had before they came down?
You can, but that's not being in this world. That's sort of like nullifying the world. Like going back to my original state. My original state was that I didn't have a body, and so therefore I didn't have a question of will. And so there's nothing new. In that sense, we say we already knew the whole Torah, so I'm just relearning what I knew anyway. By the way, because I think we mentioned this, I'm not sure if we didn't mention it here, but this is one of the reasons why there's such a big difference between learning Torah and doing repetition of what one learned. That for most people, 99% of people, learning is a very enjoyable experience, but repeating what I learned is a very annoying and nobody wants to do it. Unsatisfying is the right word. Very unsatisfying. But that's exactly where the will comes in. Meaning to learn, again, is to leave the body, but to do a repetition is to harness my will to do something that I don't want to do.
Learning is leaving
And
the
that-
body?
The repetition to teach it?
To learn it a second time, until you... Chazara.
To learn the same thing.
Right, to learn the same thing again.
Does it mean to learn in the first place because we learned it during the 9 months?
Can, right.
Did you say learning you leave your body?
Ken, learning is a very enjoyable experience for most people because it doesn't require a lot of will, especially if you're just sitting and listening. But even if you're not, I think even when you're active, it's even more. It's trying to figure out a problem and whatever. It's intellect. It's pure enjoyment. The joy is in bina. It's an understanding. The greatest joy is when
you
it
understand
can,
it.
but you try to. You've experienced the joy of understanding something once, and you come to it again. But the problem is that you're only gaining enjoyment. You're not really doing will in this sense. The harder will, carrying the load, is when you do repetitions.
Because it's not so.
There's not so much enjoyment there.
To learn it the second.
You have to force yourself. It's like all exercises of will. In that sense, a person receives a lot more reward, if you want, from repetition than from just learning something once. Say like that in this world, there's very few people that by learning something once they remember it.
Right.
So if you want to make a career out of Torah, you have to do a lot of hard work. What's the hard work? It's not learning. It's the repetitions.
Well, it's like preparing to teach. The repetition is preparing the same lesson to teach, so it's hard.
One time is fun.
It's still work more than just learning
It's not as, no, I think it's still just as enjoyable. The really difficult thing is once you've finished, Now repeat it again, and repeat it again, until you remember it fully. It's not by mistake that, or not by chance, that the Gemara likens this to the way that it described repetition is that it's like a shuk of donkeys that carry heavy burdens, right? That if you go 10 miles, it says you pay one zuz, and then if you go 10.1 miles, it's 2 zuz already. It like jumps up. Why? Because it says that until 10 it's all enjoyable, or it's one level. But to do more than that, to break yourself and to be able to do more than what you're used to will, that's already a whole new level, and therefore what you receive is tremendous more. Again, I'm saying that Torah as an occupation, in the end, requires a lot of chazara, a lot of repetition, and therefore it's like, again, in this world already. When you make it into an occupation, you come into this world. It's not just something that you do on Shabbos to enjoy yourself. Okay? How does this all play out with marital divorce between a couple? So we said that during the marriage, one side or the other didn't have will. Even in a good marriage, that happens to some degree. That it could be that in a good marriage, the only difference is that they switch from time to time, right?
Like if one side always gives in.
Right. Like if one side is completely docile to the other, so that's like not having will. It's boring for some people. Some people enjoy it because they're on the side that can. Or some people, you have to know that there's couples that are like this.
Like robots, somebody that was...
I wouldn't call it robotic. I think that a
They'd
person
like it to be the
who likes to be taken care of.
Sir remercier.
How do you say it?
Sir remercier.
What does that mean?
L'école Sir is remercier. Every heart has it covered.
Right. There are people who that's what they want. They don't want to have the responsibility of deciding, of finding out what they want. They'd rather that somebody else tell them what they want. Okay? People like that are very happy with this. It could be a very good marriage. One side has a lot of will, or at least knows what they want, and the other side says, I never really knew what I want to do and how I want to do it. Okay, it's fine. I don't mind.
But isn't it that today, because you said, or you obviously, that towards the end, manhood comes out, that the women are too strong.
Okay.
No? And
That's what causes that you have to be divorced before you get married. Meaning, again, what's the divorce then? It's giving, usually, the female side the will.
But if they're stronger in the first place,
Who's stronger in the first place?
women.
No, so that's what I'm saying. So if you're now marrying today, you have to already understand it's like your wife has already been divorced once, and she has will.
But you can't give her the will and stay in the marriage?
Of course, that's what I'm saying. That's Yevamos coming before Kiddushin.
So that's why
That's Gittin coming before Kiddushin.
twice the Hotapet.
That you have to break them before you can receive them.
Right.
Okay, that's a different answer. That there is something cathartic, call it even, about breaking it before you get it. But we'll explain in a moment what it means. But it's a preparation. To say it another way is that if you say somebody doesn't have will, how would you say that in Hebrew? I don't have will. So what do I have? I have your will, right? So what does a woman say in the morning? To be a female means that I am still in Gan Eden. Whose will do I have? Only Hashem's, meaning only my husband's. Doesn't matter. Same idea. I don't have my own. That's what it used to be like to be feminine. If you already brought up that, but that's the archetypal feminine. The archetypal feminine is being in a state of Gan Eden and not having will of my own. And therefore everything is academic. Meaning all the problems, I'll give you an example. What does it mean not to have will? If there's a like I keep thinking of a particular family in my family, that the husband and wife are very much like this. It's not that she doesn't do anything; she does a ton. She does it, but everything that she does is in a sense already predetermined. She has a lot of action, but the action is academic. What do I mean by academic? Every Friday she calls up the grocery store and she makes a list of what she wants, and by 11 o'clock they bring her all the boxes of everything she needs and she prepares Shabbos. So why do I say there's no will here? Because first of all, every Shabbos is exactly the same, but that's something else. But more importantly, who pays for it? Where's the connection to the real world? There's almost no connection. Her connection to the real world is she prepares it. She does something.
That's not true anymore.
But
I know that.
I said, oh, hold on. I said, but that's like in the old. That's how it used to be. Like you don't have to worry about the real world. You don't have to worry about being separate. About, again, your sustenance. When they were in Gan Eden, they didn't have to worry about where the sustenance would come from. It just came. But the moment you're outside of Gan Eden, your biggest concern is, how do I grow the food? How do I make money? How do I support myself? So it doesn't mean necessarily that somebody is flat, that they're like an amoeba. It just means that their connection to the real world, to having to sustain themselves, it's not really there. So they're really performing somebody else's will. Or in Hebrew it's called Bala Mea or Bala Dea. That a person who has the money, he's the one who has the consciousness, the decision, right? And I just perform it. So obviously to perform there's some element of will, but it's not at the same level.
So what's the difference between doing something for him?
For him,
Right.
it's not for me.
But it's a choice,
Okay? It's in a sense it's a choice, but that's the question. Are you choosing every time you do this, or are you in that state already? You're just flowing. So what I wanted to say is,
But there's a big difference.
there's a huge difference. That's the whole difference. That's the question of whether are you really first marriage or second marriage.
What happens when it's like you do Beatle, you want to do it for somebody else, and then halfway through, you forget, I chose this. And then
Right.
you're
So
suddenly resentful
Right.
or fighting it.
Right. That resentment has to be solved by either rekindling the original love, the original choice, or sometimes you can't rekindle it from the inside. That's what he's saying, that sometimes divorce is a rectification of that situation. Because really, what are you battling? You're battling the fact that you don't have will. So either you take will from your husband or you take it independently. Those are the two options, as it were. Again, it's the same thing with husband, it could be. Exactly the same thing. First marriage is a state of Gan Eden, that's the whole point. That's a state of natural existence that really takes care of itself. And when you think about first marriage in the Gemara, it's really that way, that people used to get married very, very near the age of 13. So they didn't really take care of themselves. It was a state in which everything that they're living and doing is sort of make-believe, because it's the parents taking care of, right? Their parents are the ones taking care of it. And in that respect, they only have to get along. So that's what's called imbat gilo, that they're similar enough to be able to get along. Because they really don't have tools that are linked to to a real relationship where two wills have to meet. So now you mentioned before that in our times, Malchus is much higher. So what does that mean in practice? It means that a woman really can't say Shasani Kirtzono.
No?
It's a very big problem for her. A very big problem to say that. What do you mean? A woman is now, to be independent, to be outside of Gan Eden, means that I have my own will. It's just that I decide to annul my will and give it back to you, Hashem. But I can't say that you made me according to your will anymore, because I make the decision. First thing that comes out of this, and hopefully begin to explain it, is that if a woman is divorced or widowed, she has to find her own will in respect to her relationship with Hashem. If until now, Yiddishkeit was what my husband brought into the house, so from now on it's dependent on me. This is the thing that most women who are divorced or become widowed have to deal with right away. I can choose to continue what my husband did, but in truth, it could be that what I do is different. And I would say that if a woman is very, very astute about this, she would decide that what my husband did is not enough, that I want to do more, that this whole thing gave me now will, so I can do the same, but really I want to do more. Same thing with when a child leaves his parents in a good way. So he says, what my parents did was very nice, but I want to do more. And I have more than this. But what does it also mean? This is the reason that he gave this. Again, I'll describe the figurative language that was used in the book, and then try to explain why. He said it's like leaving, divorce is like leaving Pharaoh, leaving Egypt behind, in order to go to Mount Sinai. That's the language that he used in the first part that I just quoted here. What does he mean to say? What is a get called in the language of Torah? When the Torah refers to a get, to annulling a marriage, what is it called? A document that's given by the husband to the wife. It's called a Sefer Kritut, a book of severing. Not karet, it's Kritut, like we're severing the connection between us.
Sefer what?
Severing, cutting.
What is karet?
No, it's from the same root to cut something off. But here we're cutting the marriage. But it's called a book. And the word book is not very common in the Torah at all. There's another book called Sefer HaBrit that Moshe Rabbeinu read to the people before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah. And according to Chazal, that was Bereshis, that he had already written up to Matan Torah. And those are basically the only two. Then there's also one mention, Haloim Ktuvim al Sefer HaYashar. That Sefer Bereshit is also sometimes called Sefer HaYashar. So, in fact, when you think about Bereshit and Yashar, it has almost all the letters of Bereshit in it, except for the Aleph. It has all of it. So what's going on here? So says the Tana de Eliyahu, this commentary on it, that when the husband gives his wife a get, it's like Matan Torah.
Oh yeah.
It's
right.
like giving her the Torah. Because what is he saying, actually?
Go learn.
He's saying from now on, your sustenance won't come from me, but I'm like Hashem gave us the Torah. He's giving you the Torah. Right, it's lo b'shamayim anymore. You're not in shamayim anymore. You can't trust me to take care of you. You have to take care of you. It's like, again, like man being expelled from Gan Eden. You can't trust me, says Hashem, to give you your sustenance anymore. You'll have to go and earn it. But for you to be able to earn it, you also have to have will. But the will says, here's the book that says, if you decide to do these things, that's your rectification. That's how you'll make your sustenance. That's why I said also before that I think that when a woman is divorced or widowed, then she needs to do more than what her husband did, because it's now up to her to create the connection with Hashem directly. It doesn't go through her husband anymore. He's not the one who has the will; she has the will now.
That's what the Rebbe told us when he said, I did everything.
And
Now
now
it's up
it's
to
up
you.
to you.
Okay.
It's like a
It's like a divorce in that sense. But again, if you think about divorce as something negative, then it's like this was. But if you understand that the whole nature of relationship was to bring both of us in the end to have will, so sometimes it can't be rectified. If this is the purpose of being, this is the purpose of being a human being, to have will, so sometimes this wasn't rectified in the marriage itself. Meaning that the woman wasn't able to develop her separate will in a way that worked inside the marriage. And so it's like it's saying, the rectification of the marriage, rectification of what the whole purpose of coming together was, in this case is for you to go off on your own and to find your own will, to find what you want to become, to find the nature of your relationship with Hashem. So this teaches us a tremendous amount about what the nature of a good relationship is. Meaning that both sides have will. Okay.
What about people who don't get married ever?
So they're developing their own will separate
All the
from
time.
all
They
the
don't
time.
need the marriage.
I can't say you don't need, because in the end, if there's only your will and nothing else, that's very close to being like God. The whole nature of having a rectified will is that there's other things to take into account. There's somebody else near you. There's another will that you're facing. And you can't just do whatever you want, because when there's nothing, I have to understand, Hashem's will is very strange. It's not overbearing. That's why you can nullify to it. It's very difficult to nullify to somebody else's will if they're overbearing, because then you don't feel that you're submitting, you feel that you're being trampled. Why is the nature of serving God not a feeling of being trampled, but rather a feeling of finding myself?
This is compassion.
Because His will is not such that it's in your face. He gives it to you and says, it's up to you to decide. Do you want to nullify your will and follow mine, or do you want to continue to follow your own will?
I know a woman, she's been divorced twice, and she says she misses that. But she hasn't got through to rub against how to...
That's what it means to be in a relationship. That there are two wills and they don't always align, and you have to figure out how to make them work together.
But I want to ask something. I don't know if it's connected to if I read it in the book or one of you said it, that a woman is always scared that her husband might leave her.
Is she?
I don't know. I found it very strange.
It says in Marital that a woman wants to be together. The nature of a woman is more to want to be together. But again, it depends on how much will she has. That women today may not have that.
They have too much will.
Why too much? There's never too much.
Too much of the wrong will.
Maybe. All of us, you could say that we have too much of the wrong will, right? The will that says that I'm just going to do whatever I want. The question, again, when I was created, the purpose of my creation is to have will. And then the question is, what am I going to do with this will? Am I going to use it just to follow myself and make myself into God? Or will I take my will and submit before Hashem's will? And again, Hashem's will isn't overbearing. He doesn't force me to do anything. He only opens it up for me. He only allows me to. He gives me free will to decide what do I want to do.
The woman doesn't have the mitzvah of getting married, only the man.
Right.
Is
Right.
that because of procreation?
So that it's a lot of reasons. In principle, it's related to the question of procreation, but not necessarily. There's also opinions that she doesn't have to get married, but she still has to procreate. So there's all the different variations in the opinions can be found. In the end, you would say that the reason that she doesn't have to get married is again because her point is not to submit her will to Hashem's will in this case. Okay? Again, like everything else, it's like she comes in as if she's in Gan Eden. And it's the man who wants everything. He's the one who decides, he's the one who wants, he brings the will into the story. And then she receives it through him. But today, it's not like that. That even beforehand, people have will, both sides have will. So what is the antidote to two people having will? It has to be that we've already been divorced once before. Before we got married, we already divorced. And the whole will that we want, and this we talked about in the past, is to submit our will together to Hashem. Both our wills together.
So this is why all the marriage go through crisis. You don't have
Right.
to divorce, physically
Right,
get, but
right. Every time that there is a crisis in the marriage, it's a form of divorce, and it's meant exactly to increase the will. It's not meant to lower it. Meaning, if you solve it by saying, well, one side has to give in, okay, but it might work for a while, but it'll just come back. The real solution has to be that I already have will, meaning it's like I was divorced already, but I've decided together to submit our will to something higher. First of all, one way of doing it is if it's good, or if it's fortunate or unfortunate that this is how it works, I don't know what to say, but for a lot of people it means having a Rav that they do what he says. And having a Rebbe, having something else, and they ask him about everything. So that's one way of doing it. Can it be higher? I think it can also be higher. Meaning that they can attain a direct relationship with Hashem, also without something in the middle, without any intermediary. It's not necessarily negative. I'm not saying Chas v'Shalom that having somebody in the middle is negative, but sometimes it masks the fact that you both have independent wills, and that they also have to work together.
What does that mean, that together they both submit their relationship to Hashem, their will?
So if after divorce the woman has to create her own relationship with Hashem through Torah, so it means that to be divorced in a marriage is that you can sit and learn together, and together define your relationship with Torah, with Hashem through Torah. At some level, I'm not saying that you have to be able to open up books, but even just to discuss. That things are open, that they're not... I think one of the main things that happens in shidduchim from young people is that they discuss what kind of house they want to have. So what are they really discussing? So they're saying, how do our combined wills fit together under the roof of some kind of devotion to Hashem's will? Exactly how do we envision that Hashem's will look in our home? And things break apart when one side or the other deviates, when suddenly you don't want to submit. This we talked about. So for instance, if it was very clear in the beginning that we want a home where certainly the husband goes every morning to Minyan, and he goes 3 times a day, let's say. Certainly he goes 3 times a day, and he learns whatever that. Maybe young people don't know yet what it means, but in general terms they want this and that, and so on. And then suddenly as life goes on, they already came into a certain pace. I mean, they've worked out at the beginning, that it's not exactly what you envisioned and so on, but it already works. it suddenly begins to fall apart if one side doesn't live up to their agreement. Meaning after they've been through all the figuring it out, like, okay, really what works is that I go to minyan in the morning, but then mincha, I don't know, whatever they work out in the end. And then one side starts deviating from that. And then the wills separate because they're not under one roof anymore. Each one is going his own separate way. So when it comes, to marital counseling, you have to understand that the first stage is you can't run away from the fact that people have separate wills today, even before they get into marriage. It's not the same as it used to be. Because, like you said, the nukva is higher, the female is higher. So she already might even have her own connection to Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be that she already has been learning for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has a picture of what her connection to Hashem looks like. So certainly at some level she has to, they have to come to some kind of common ground. Otherwise they can't get married. But then when things go awry, the understanding here is that every time that things go awry, it's because something happened to the will. And if they go awry completely, the divorce will lead to the woman finding more will. That's the whole point here. She's looking for more will in the end. That's what she wants, her own direct connection to will. She doesn't want to say Shasani Girtzono. She wants to say Shalasani Isha. She wants to say that I have my own will. That's really what she wants.
Sorry, can I just say that they're actually in a real situation when that's happened, and it's the wife that wants to leave the husband. She's obviously access to her will. Then would it be appropriate to approach the woman to redirect her will into putting it back into the marriage?
Right. That's exactly it. It's to acknowledge. I'm not saying that you should encourage somebody to get divorced. On the contrary, if I know really what you're looking for there could be a very easy path even to doing exactly what you just said. To take that will and redirect it into the marriage itself. For instance, for some women it's like building a career. Right? Why? Because it fits under the roof. Why is it that until age 40 you didn't need anything? Well, I didn't. Now I need. Now I have this need for my own will. So let's see how you can put it into the marriage. How you can put it under the same roof. The moment I understand what divorce is about, meaning the good divorce, here it's like saying that there's a positive divorce. And divorce is to be able to connect directly with Hashem. That's what I want. I want to feel that Hashem is providing. I don't want to feel that you're providing. By the way, I think that if the husband continually doesn't just provide, but continually says, what I have is because of you, then meaning that we're together, what we have is because of you, meaning you're the one whose will is driving down Hashem's sustenance. So there could be a solution to many things. Just saying that all the time.
He has to really feel that.
Can. It's true, by the way.
Yeah, I
Well,
understand.
I don't think you could say it otherwise.
I think very often for women, perhaps when they reach a crisis of their own sense of self-actualization, then it starts to weigh down on the marriage. And there's someone I knew who wanted to break up the marriage, and she went to the Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Rabashaman, and he said to her, go and study jewelry making. She was an artist.
Fine.
They're married today, have a kid, and redirect your need for self-actualization, and maybe define your will in a creative way and that's actually what saved the marriage.
So now there's a new definition for what it means
To get divorced.
for the level of the relationship to be either ezel or what we call the lo. Remember, there's lo, ezel, kenegdo.
Oh.
There's 3 levels of relationship. Kenegdo is when they're opposed to one another.
Yes.
And ezel is when they help one another. And lo is when they're one. So one way of thinking of it is that if they're at the level of Ezel, so that's like there are two separate wills here, but they complement one another, they help one another. So it's like what you just described, that she goes off and she builds her own career. And that career is separate, as it were, from her husband's. He doesn't help, but they help one another, because here it's building the home. A lo, lamed vav level, is when there's only, as it were, one will. That's like they work with one mind. So I think that one of the reasons why the Rebbe was so big on shlichus, because
Made them work together.
it makes, especially a Chabad house, so everybody today calls it co-directors. And theoretically the idea is that it's directing the home together, directing the house together, that it's a house for this. How does that work? You have to have, again, that we're both submitting ourselves to a higher will. So in this case, it's like the shlichus of spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit and so on. But that's what it means, that they're of one mind. In the end, they're of one will. Because having one, you don't have to, it's very interesting. What this is saying also is that you don't have to understand things the same way. Because understanding is not the same thing as will. Meaning, you may have a completely different take on things than me, but in the end, we're unified in our will about what needs to be done. I come to it from this understanding, you come from that understanding. You can have hours of disagreements at the Shabbos table. And yet in the end, it's all very good, because it's just Shivim Panim LaTorah. The Torah has 70 faces. But in the end, our will has become one.
Just a small commentary on Rav Salman Shimon's work at the Rebbe's Rav. I heard about 30 years ago that he said that it's better not to say, to just skip Shertzani Kirtzon, because it's not a consider. But if someone will feel bad, then they can say it.
Right.
For me, I thought, now I'm going to say the half of a second every day. What a deal.
Yeah, it's a lot. It adds up to a lot of hours. Or like Rav Ginsburg said, that maybe you should say Shalat Sanisha, because it does say that in the Siddur.
And I did learn that from Y.Y. Jacobson, that it represents the shifcha who marries, that then she becomes a kala. So it's, I'm not really Shidasho, I'm not an Isha, I'm a kala.
Right. Or maybe I'm the mother even. So that's another level. But, okay, so what we got out of this, first of all, is a different picture of divorce. A divorce doesn't necessarily mean the end of the relationship. It's actually the rectification of the relationship. Because the whole relationship in the beginning was in order to achieve a state of will. And sometimes the only way that it can come about is if the woman finds her own channel straight to Hashem. It's a very interesting thing today. I don't know, before the class I thought about it. I didn't have time to really look it up. But this whole thing of alimony. Who is it for? Is it for the woman or for the children?
Children.
So theoretically they say it's for the children.
Well, what's the question? Sorry.
Alimony. Mezonot. Is the mezonot for the woman or for the children?
How can you separate them when they're...
So that's why I had a problem. Because normally when they say mezonot, you say that it's for the children.
Right.
But right away you say that, but in the end, why are the children with the mother? Because you're saying that in a certain sense, they're one unit.
Right.
They are.
So you're also providing for her. But that's the point here, is that when divorce is for rectification, at least she should be independent. Otherwise, you're lingering the connection in a way that's not positive.
So the mezonah should be for the kids.
So if it's just for the children and goes somehow separately, I don't know how you would set it up, but like in the time of
If you
the...
want to feed your children, but the woman is making the food for them. What,
She said,
supposed to eat?
she's not supposed to eat, okay, but then it becomes that she's also dependent on you.
Well, at certain level,
My
yes.
father paid maintenance, so that my mother would keep the pay for like school fees and things. She
Can, I
never
understand.
used it at all, ever. It was for things that we needed.
Okay, so what you're saying is that But so then, like the idea is to tell the woman, don't use this as a crutch. Don't be dependent on this money.
It's tough.
But you just said you're.
But she needed that money to pay for.
I understand, but don't use it as a crutch for yourself.
Uh-huh.
Meaning, don't pay your tuition. I don't know if you're going now to study. Don't use it for your clothing. Somehow keep it in separate accounts.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can do it really because it's very, very complex. But it's saying that at least psychologically, for the divorce to be something good that builds her, she has to become independent in that sense. Because that's what was lacking during the marriage. And apparently she needed it separately. This independence of will. In other words, every time that the Jewish people cry out, we want to go back to Egypt, what are they saying? We want to be dependent again.
It's easier.
It's easier. We don't want to have to be independent. We don't want to have to be independent and depend on Hashem, because that requires us to submit ourselves before the Torah. We have to find our own channel to Hashem's will. Okay? So it's like an advice for any woman who's divorced is to figure out how to separate yourself. Okay? How to separate yourself out of the equation, even if you have little children.
No, because it's like, if the man doesn't pay, right?
Then she has to do it all herself anyway.
It's really hard.
But to explain that this is not a b'diavad, it's a l'chatchila. It's a l'chatchila for you to be able to be independent. You know what? To the level of taking care of your children by yourself. Empower yourself. Because that's what, and then the interesting thing is, if it's done that way, then it could very well be that they'll get together again.
So do you think over the cry, the inner urge in a woman to want to separate is an inner cry for her to access her will
Right.
and become independent, to create that separation?
Right.
And it could be a very healthy thing.
And in a certain sense, it could even be that that's what the husband is looking for also. That's why they divorce.
Because she didn't have,
Because she was too
Right.
submissive to him.
And she had more potential.
Right.
I mean, can you say that?
That's like saying that it's besheret also. That the divorce is also besheret. Just like coming together is besheret, so is the divorce. That in the end it's rectification. It's not a failure. Okay. We'll use all this next time to begin to understand how you do marriage the right way. But here, first of all, I want to understand how they are separate.
When a person can't see where they begin and a person ends, or
Then
begins,
they call it dependence, right?
then you get into victim abuse. because
Exactly,
that-
exactly,
not
exactly.
having
All
a
these things,
clear
right.
Sense of self.
Right, exactly. Very, very important what you just said. That leads a person into a victimization stance. That I'm always a victim of my circumstances,
And I'm bound to go. That makes them bound to go.
and that's why the marriage isn't good, because he also can't stand it. Why am I? Meaning he's always to blame. Why is he to blame? Because there's nobody here standing in front of him. It's just a victim of his behavior.
But today a lot of the situations are that the men are not coming through Panasa and it's the women that are out there.
Nachon.
working.
Then it's
What's
reversed.
that? Yeah.
It's actually reversed, and that also doesn't work well because it could be that he doesn't have his will.
He's worried.
So can you say that really we're supposed to become all that we can be, which
Right.
means like using our will to the fullest, and ultimately, I mean, either it keeps us in the marriage or it takes us away from the marriage, and submit our will to
Right,
Hashem.
right. The ultimate is when both have will and they submit it together to Hashem in some
But
form.
we're supposed to do that.
Can,
That's what
can,
Hashem wants.
definitely. So what we'll do next time is we'll begin to discuss what does it mean in a regular marriage. Okay, how do you use this understanding to build a marriage the right way? So you take people who are just newlywed, 18, 19, 20, and what recognition they have to come to in order to have this understanding even before they start. Meaning they have to be divorced before they're married. They have to understand that we're really separate.
Two separate.
Okay.
So I had a teacher actually, and she.
So I'm going to stop it. Sorry. Yeah.
They had 4 little children, and